When talking about the Vikings, their 0-3 start to the season, there's plenty of blame to go around, and I understand why one would want to look at the quarterback first early. My only issue with Kirk Cousins is that the higher the stakes get, whether it's a game, a drive, a snap, the higher the stakes get, the more clueless he becomes. So, for example, against Tampa, there were several instances where key downs he settled for the check down passes. The Chargers wasting 29 seconds off the clock, left in the game, mind you, to still have a chance to win that game. Just a lackadaisical effort, attitude. The whole offense was just super comfortable to where finally when they realized to go from a relaxed state to then panicking and say, oh my God, we only have a couple of seconds to get another playoff. Let's see what happens. That's a lot to overcome. The offense is following you. You're the leader in that situation. Also, 4th and 8 in the playoffs last year. But at this point, it's an indictment on me if I continue to get upset about it in real time, because Kirk Cousins, he's 35 years old. This is his 12th season out of Michigan State. This is just who he is. There's plenty of blame to go around, but the reality is there's a long list of topics to get to before you even get to the quarterback, because the fact is Kirk Cousins is completing 70% of his passes. He's first in passing yards, first in completions, first in passing touchdowns. That's in spite of being, the most hit quarterback in the league so far. The Vikings as a team are last in turnover differential, and that's a combination of playmakers fumbling the football and the defense's lack of takeaways. And speaking of the defense, they are 6th worst in the league. You just can't win a championship because of Kirk Cousins. Talking about high stakes, the playoffs is a series of high stakes, which is why you must move on from him after this season. But statistically speaking, he's been the best quarterback so far in the National Football League. Blame goes elsewhere. And I've talked about this enough. I don't want to rehash it. I've talked about it enough this week. The front office mishaps, poor coaching on the offensive side of the ball. I don't want to continue beating a dead horse here. There's still plenty of season left to possibly turn it around. And I want to actually give a bone here to the general manager, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. I strongly believe this is just going to fall apart. I don't trust him at all, but that's neither here nor there. I am fair. Every regime, you got to give them at least 3 years before we talk about, okay, we need to make some changes. You still have time to turn things around. The issue is that for every major mishap that you make, you almost have to make up for that twofold. And the problem is, the more major mistakes that you make and nothing else to really balance it out, it makes it harder and harder for you to save your job, so to speak. But it is possible. And here's an example. The San Francisco 49ers. They made arguably the biggest just blunder of an NFL draft trade that I've ever seen. Giving up 3 first-round picks in order to take Trey Lance. The Miami Dolphins, they turned those picks into Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and Bradley Chubb. It was an all-time botch job. For any other regime, that's a fireable offense. In fact, I saw through this offseason, even going into the preseason, while the Niners were going through that whole debacle and Brock Purdy, he's going to be our starting quarterback, and Trey Lance was 3rd on the depth chart before he ended up getting sent over to the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, Niners bloggers national media outlets. Every morning I drop my kids off to daycare. On the way there and back home, I listen to Sirius XM radio channels, RG3 on ESPN. We're talking about how John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan should be fired. Fired! I was like, are you kidding? You can't fire these guys. They wanted these dudes gone. But talking about making up for a major mistake, what is the ultimate goal in professional sports? Winning. Now, granted, they haven't won a championship in a long time, but they are championship contenders. They have been championship contenders under this regime. In spite of the Trey Lance debacle, they've been a championship contender. They've been in the conversation. They are championship contenders every single year because of them. That's why. In fact, not that long ago, within the last week or so, they've gotten extensions. You can't fire them. What else are you going to do? The way they built that team, Brock Purdy was Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in last year's draft. The way that they've built that team, you could plug in damn near anybody at quarterback and they will succeed, which says a lot more about Trey Lance than it does about John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. That's how you make up for all-time blunders. With Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the 2022 draft class, the way he's gone about the interior offensive line, the defensive line, Justin Jefferson is pissed off. He hasn't done enough good to make up for all of that, but he does have a chance, though. I will say, I will give him an olive branch. First, you have to draft a quarterback, because then that buys you, by default, at least another 2 years. You can't fire this guy. He just drafted a quarterback. Let's see how he builds the team around him. But also, you have to make sure that you get it right. Based off of all the other clown show decision makings that you have done, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, you also have to make sure that you get it right. That the quarterback that you do take in next year's draft, he's clearly the guy, and that buys you more time and more time to make up for all the mistakes that you've made. It's possible. I have my doubts. We'll see what happens.